You know what? There's certain things that are common among all people. One is you're born and you die. And the second thing is that we all have common human traits. So there's certain things that separate us from people in the past and certain things that are very similar. The Canadian History Survey course is really a broad course. It examines all aspects of Canadian history in this time period from 1500 down to the 1980s. And what we try and do is really understand the parameters in which our country was founded, who lived here before the creation of Canada as a country in 1867, and the multiplicity of identities and peoples who came to form Canada in 1867. We also talk about World War I, in which for the first time you have the transport of thousands, hundreds of thousands of men across the Atlantic in order to fight in a European war. But also at the same time in Canada, people themselves are being mobilized to ration, mobilized in industry. Women are integrated into the workforce in a way which had never been done before. Those are some of the things we talk about in the Canadian History Survey. Why should you take history? Well, you know what? In the first instance, it's just fascinating, right? The most fascinating thing in the world is to understand people who live differently than you. There's a murder case here in Toronto, 1904. There's this young couple, Alexander and Edith Martin. She's a recent immigrant to Toronto. She's gotten involved with Alexander Martin. They've gotten married and they have a young child. They've got $2 left in their pockets and they don't know what to do because Edith has gotten pregnant again. So she's pregnant, they got very little money. They've got a young son who's already 9 months old and they rent a boat. Now, Alexander and Edith are out rowing towards the Toronto Islands. Alexander says to Edith, you haven't taken care of this. You haven't found a place for a son. You're pregnant. We can't afford this. And he picks up the child, 9 months old, and throws him in the water. Then he strikes the child in the head with the oar. The child sinks. The child dies. Now, it's almost like an instantaneous act on his part because he doesn't know what to do. He's poor. And in a moment of, emotion, he says, I gotta get rid of this child. Now, why do I tell you this? Right? Well, it's a fascinating story. Today in our system, we have something called social welfare. We have a system which would take care of individuals like that. That's not true of the early part of the 1900s here in Toronto. Very, very different. People are poor, and they don't have the means sometimes to support their children, so they take rash actions. Those are the kinds of things we talk about in Canadian history. We talk about a system and a society which is so different from our own that it almost defies description. But it also tells us that, we've made progress. And there are reasons why we have certain systems in place to take care of individuals in society who may not be able to actually take care of themselves. So history is endlessly fascinating. Why else should you take history? Well, one of the things we do is we read. We write, we analyze, and we argue. And those are transferable skills. One of the most important things about history is, when you go into the private sector, when you go and get a job, the most important skill that you're going to have to use is your ability to take information, to take data, and build an argument. And those are the types of skills we build among our students. We also teach people how to write. So what is the thesis, right? How do you build an argument? How do you make your sentences short, simple, and direct so that somebody sitting on the other side of you can read it and say, yeah, that makes sense to me. But also what we try and build is your ability to actually respond quickly. One of the things I've done in my courses in the past is have oral exams. Now, a lot of students get really intimidated by that. They say, you're the professor and you're asking me these questions. And I get intimidated and I shut down. I says, well, that's all right? That's all right. Because better that you shut down now than when you're in a job interview. And that's a good thing, right? Because when you go into a job interview, your potential employer is going to be asking you these kinds of questions. And you better be prepared to think on your feet. That's what you have to do. So there's all kinds of innovative ways in the history department that we use in order to develop those thinking skills, your ability to think on the spot. That's very, very important, right? That's extraordinarily important.